Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv, and this time I'm speaking with David Musaraca of the podcast This Goose is Cooked. Hello, David. Thank you for speaking with me today. Hope you're okay.
Hi, Marv. Thanks for having me. Doing
Thank.
pretty well.
That's good to know. That's great. And for those who are listening and can't see video, he is wearing absolutely top class merch on his head with that baseball cap.
Got to get the plug in. So,
Haven't we all? I need to start doing some merch. So your show then is about you. You look at children's books or books that are written for children, and so do you have any actual special memory yourself of reading as a child?
I do. I was read to a lot as a child. So,
Right.
um, I mean, whether it was my parents or my mom reading to me just about every night. I think the one that sticks out to me though, when I was thinking about this, is we would go over to my grandparents' house, and we would only visit them a couple of times a year. And when we got there, though, they had all my dad's old children's books, and they would be in a little um, sort of side table, and it was like Christmas almost. You would kind of crawl over there or go over there and open it up, and then all these old children's books would spill out, and they had so many good ones, from Curious George to The Little Engine That Could. So that's, I mean, those were the best memories, those old books, and sitting down on my grandparents' lap and just hearing those time and time again. So,
That's great. You've made me think of a memory when I was a kid. Now it should really be about you, this show, but you're bringing it out to me now. So um, where we lived before, where we are now, where we lived before, we moved there, and I was saying to my girlfriend Louise, we're not married, but we might as well be married. But I was saying to her that when I was a child, I used to go to a school near to that town that we'd moved to, Newark-on-Trent, in England, and back then they used to have a normal library, and then they had about a mile further away, they had what was called a children's library for children to go to. So it was full of all little books, and we weren't living far away from where that used to be, and it actually became a hairdresser's, a barber's shop. So ultimately, whenever I went for a haircut, when we were living there, I would always go there. And I said to Louise that it reminded me that when I was a child, I used to go there to go and get books. And I have really fond memories of actually being in the back, because in the back room of that children's library, there's like these little chairs that you could, all these like little chairs or settees or all this furniture in the back where you just sit down, and they didn't mind the fact that I could just sit there for 2 hours, it felt like, and I would just read cover to cover, something like The Cat in the Hat, or or something by Enid Blyton, obviously, and all these people. And I remember reading T.S. Eliot, T.S. Eliot, what is it? Old Possum's Practical Cats, I think it's called. And it's a book of poems by T.S. Eliot about cats that are really funny. But I have these memories of reading these in the back of this. There's something incredible about memories of reading as a child.
there really is. I, I just, myself, I would just get lost in the pictures, and I could just sit there and stare at the pictures. They would spark whatever was going on in my imagination that day, and yeah, it's a great experience. And I know what you're talking about with those little chairs and everything. You can get some work done as a child at those little desks and chairs, and just go to town reading. So,
But I remember Dr. Seuss being a particular favorite, really, because it's something about, because of the way that he wrote, the incredible, because it was always poetic, it always rhymed, but it wasn't always real English as well. There were some made up words in there as well, but so it had fun in there, the meter of it, how it was written as well, was perfect. And then the pictures that went with the writing as well fit perfectly with it. I mean, I know recently I heard a fact that him and Stan Lee from Marvel used to be in the same unit in the armed forces. So, and then I thought, when I thought that, I thought, wow, two people that are really important to young kids, you know, with the comics and then with those books, that they would go on such almost similar sort of life lines in a way.
That's crazy. I had no clue. That'd be fun to be a part of that unit.
It would.
But
Did they actually get any work done, or were they just there writing these incredible things that are still lasting to this day?
yep, yep.
Wow. So, do you? This is a stupid question for anybody that's listening. This guy is sat in front of bookcases that are absolutely packed with all sorts of reading. So this is a redundant question to somebody who's looking at this, but do you still read a lot?
Only children's books. I'm glad the backdrop works really well. It's completely fake, but it makes me look like I'm quite the reader of many leather-bound books. But mainly children's books today. I read several a day, and then I choose one to review. Um, so, because the reason being is my sister has kids. Some of my friends are becoming parents themselves, so that's what I'm really around all the time is children and things like that. So I'm always checking out children's books.
So does Uncle David go around to his sisters and read stories to his nephews and nieces?
I do actually. So they except it gets a little tiring after you have to read the same book over about 10 times on repeat. But you certainly perfect the characters, that's for sure.
I'm sure she probably prefers that to all the times that she's watched Frozen or something like that on DVD.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So have you actually? So it's just children's books. You don't read any other books now. I mean, or do you occasionally read
Uh,
non-children related books?
so when I'm reading, I stick to it's a long story and I can get into it for you.
Yep.
But when I'm reading, I stick to typically shorter things, whether it be news bites or about sports or anything topical for that day. Uh, Growing up, I struggled in school.
Okay.
I struggled reading. It was discovered around fourth grade that I had an eye problem. It's a muscle or coordination problem.
Yep.
And so it's stopped me from being able to really read long books. After about a couple of pages, my eyes get tired and they wear out. So it's always been a struggle for me to read chapter books. Some loved ones even think I have a little bit of dyslexia thrown in there too. So that's kind of why I've stuck to children's books. And it's partly why I came up with the show as well, to kind of make fun of myself for struggling so much with being able to read longer books. But growing up, all my friends read plenty of books. They're all readers. For whatever reason, I surrounded myself by readers. So I would always have them explain books to me, whether it be The Lord of the Rings, or now they've been reading Game of Thrones. They read every book you could possibly imagine, and they'll explain to me, hey, the movie's not like the book, and they'll give me the whole rundown. So they've been kind of supportive in the process too.
That's okay. You don't need to read them now, do you?
No, no, no. When you have friends like that, you can pick up all the little tidbits and minor little details and act like you've read them. So
Well, I mean, if I'm being honest, Lord of the Rings, I got so far through, and then I have this problem where I got so far, and then they suddenly mentioned something, and that had happened. This thing that they were talking about had happened so far way back in the book, I'd completely forgotten what they were talking about. that had happened earlier on, because I take a long time to read, long time, because I haven't really got the time. So, I mean, I prefer shorter books personally as well. I don't see what the problem is with that. And you know, if you want a longer book, you can always listen to them on an audio book, I suppose.
Exactly. It's tough because a lot of people don't understand it, you know, and you're surrounded. And I totally agree. I mean, everybody should read. I try to read up on as much as I can, but I do it to my abilities, basically.
That's cool. So, have you actually got any favorite authors then that you like to read?
Um, you know, I joke. I joke. I like to say Ayn Rand because her novels are so long. I actually had to,
Yes.
for whatever reason in college, I got the same book, The Fountainhead, in two different classes. I had to read it. Luckily, the one class had me watch like the 1920s movie on it, so that helped me
Wow.
greatly uh, to pass both classes. Um, I also find it funny too, you know, in these times, most people they'll say, "Oh, it's like 1984, George Orwell's 1984." Well, actually, in I believe it was sixth grade, I my teacher read Animal Farm to me,
Yep.
so I've had no clue what people were talking about with the 1984 thing. I was like, "Oh, it's like Animal Farm," and then I realized, no, wait, that's the kids version, and 1984 is the adult one. So I quickly picked that up, and then I watched that movie as well, and so now I'm up to date on that. But as far as favorite authors go, um, another author that I might, or I read quite a bit, did a bunch of book reports on, was Gary Paulson,
Yep.
The Hatchet. That was a great book. I think I did three or four children or three or four book reports on that one. And then moving down the line into the children's books, there's quite a few. You know, we talked about Dr. Seuss.
Yep.
He's a great one. His imagination, he's just a bit off, like you were saying with his writing, but
Yep.
along with his pictures too, they're just a little bit off, and it really pairs well together. Um, the other one, Roger Hargreaves, the Mr. Tickles.
Yes. Yep. All
He's
the Mr. Men books. Yeah.
he's great. There there's just so many. Richard Scarry, uh, The Wonderful World of Richard Scarry. Um, and then is it Bill Martin Jr.? Did he
I
with
think so.
Eric Carle? They've done some books. Those two are great. I think Lois Alert did the illustrations in Chicka Chicka Boom Boom for Bill Martin Jr. That was another one that was a fun one because I mean he was able to make the alphabet fun through a sort of rhyme song, and I love that. And Lois Alert's pictures in that book they're wonderful. I don't know how you make the alphabet look fun and make them animated, but she somehow pulled it off.
She must be inspired by Sesame Street with the Count.
Yep,
Mind you,
yep.
that's numbers, but yes. Yep. But yeah, Sesame Street, they always have the letter thing, don't they? This week it's brought to you by the letter. And they always used to make it fun. When I was a kid, I used to watch that when when my dad was stationed with the army. And we used to watch basically a lot of American television was streamed over to the army base in Germany. So I'd be watching American television in an American army base. So I'd be there watching every day when I was um, I think we moved to Germany when I was about 6 months old and came back when I was about 5. So for about 4 years, I was watching Sesame Street daily. So there you go.
So you were learning the American way to pronounce words.
Yeah, and then I went to school in England and had it kicked out of me. You know,
Wow.
no, that's not how you say it. And that's why I sound
There's
like I do
some
now, is
slight
because I
differences.
don't sound like either.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I sometimes get lost when I'm reading some of the British books. I just read one. I think it was yesterday. It was called The Game of Stones. Not a very well-known book. I forget the author off the top of my head, but a lot of it was she was from England, and there was a couple of words there that kind of threw me off. There I was like, is she referring to the game, or what is she talking about?
That's, I think that's a big problem with a lot of children's authors, though, is that when they write books, you've got to remember that you've got to approach it in a way that children can read it essentially and understand what it's about to a certain degree. I mean, obviously you're trying to push their learning and get them to learn new words, but at the same time, you've not got to try to push them too far, because then it's a difficult thing to try and work, which is something that you do pick up on occasionally on your reviews.
Yeah, you, you know there are some books that I've read where it's just I don't know how a child would ever understand stand it, to be quite honest. And sometimes these authors, I think they get too caught up in whether it be the rhymes or uh, certain word or schemes that they have to set up, and they 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 just don't make any sense. And it's not, and it's not like what I was just talking about, whether it be British versus American. I mean, they're just throwing in random words to make it rhyme, and it's not useful at all. If you can't make it rhyme, don't bother. So
Or just do what we're saying, with people like, Dr. Seuss. And then when I was younger, I also read some children's books that were written by, I don't know if he's known in America, but an entertainer and writer called Spike Milligan, who was one of the members of the Goons who influenced Monty Python. And he wrote books as well. And so you've got Milliganimals, I think they're called. I think that's the name of one of his books. And so what he does is very Seuss-like, where he will make up words, but there's something interesting where you read those words that they've made up that don't really exist, but you know exactly what those words mean. For some reason, you understand them, and it's that mindset that they've got in there that captures children, that makes it able for them to understand what they're reading.
completely agree. Some people just have that talent where they can make something that if somebody else said it, you'd be like, what the heck did you just say? But they make you understand it perfectly. And Dr. Seuss does do that quite well. I don't know if it's through the language behind it or if it's the pictures in general. And that's a big thing too when you're doing children's books. You got to have the pictures match up with the words. And if that's ever a little bit off, that can be quite confusing too. But that's those kind of people are quite special, and they make it all the more fun when you can pick up goofy words or sayings and have everybody understand it. It's great.
Well, I suppose in essence, we're getting a bit highbrow here. It harkens back to people like Lewis Carroll when they were writing things like Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass and stories like that, where you've got, because he used to use a lot of made up words. So, I mean, as well as that, he wrote, the well-known Jabberwocky. So that's a made up. And then you got these strange picture of if you read the Jabberwocky, which is a bit of a big book actually for kids, but you've got this picture, and as soon as you see that picture, you know what that is, and you're able to say the word, and you know what it is. And you've got poets like Lear, who wrote, The Owl and the Pussycat, and things like that, where they will make words up. So there's a history of that, especially in children's writing, that dates back hundreds of years.
Definitely. It's well, that's kind of the magic of children's books too. Some of the great ones, even if it is 100 years ago, though, it's still applicable to today. And that's how you really know if it's a great book, is you can go back and read it. And because people weren't using the same linguistic styles,
No.
I guess, back in the 1950s as they are today. And to still be able to use those fun words and have it be applicable, whether it be the moral or just the fun sayings, to today in 2022. I mean, that's quite special.
Yeah. I suppose a modern writer that I might think of with this sort of thing would be somebody like Julia Donaldson, who wrote The Gruffalo, for instance, which is a made up
Yep.
monster. But in her writing, you know exactly what she's on about when she says this is a Gruffalo,
Yep.
even though there's
Yep.
no such thing.
Yep.
So, what was your first book then that you ever? Can you remember what the first book was that you read?
That I read, I would say the first long book that I ever read, that would probably be what I can remember. I can remember my favorite book as a child, but the first book that I had chapters and everything was Star Wars Episode 1: Anakin's Journal.
Okay.
And so I was a big fan of Star Wars back in the day, but I mean, it took me 6 months to read it, but I made it through like all 99 pages.
Wow.
So
is it better than the film, or is the film better than the book?
I would lean, well, I know a lot of people don't like Episode 1. I still don't mind it, even with Jar Jar Binks and all. So I would lean towards the film for sure on that one. I mean, they even used pictures from the film, so it was not the best adaptation.
I used to, in fact, I've still got some in storage. I used to buy books that were adaptations of films. So I think I've got a book version of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I might even have E.T. in book form as well. But they're interesting because, like you said, you get the little pictures that come from the film as well that are taken from it, that makes it more interesting.
Yep. Yeah. And again, like I said, I actually really enjoyed the movie, so to relive it through words, it was perfect for me. So
But that, we're going on a tangent here with this. So Star Wars, when Episode 1 came out, George Lucas famously said that Star Wars is meant to be for young people. It's for kids. So he said that when he wrote and he made the Episode 1, he was making it with that intention for it to be about kids. He wasn't making it for the people that had grown up with the original Star Wars. He was making it for that same age range that he made the original Star Wars for, essentially. And I think it works. And that's why he said that, in his opinion, the character of Jar Jar Binks works because it is a good character for kids.
yeah, and I mean, I guess that would make sense. I don't know when it came out. For me, I must have been fourth or fifth grade around then, maybe a little younger. And I mean, it definitely captured me. And I think the whole Jar Jar character, it's a bit controversial, but in 4, 5, and 6, they had that tandem of C-3PO and R2-D2 that was their comedic relief, and I think he needed something or some sort of comedic relief, and that's where he came up with Jar Jar. Whether you like it or not, that's what he was going for, is some comedic relief thrown in there. And sometimes it's harder to do comedy when you're just by yourself, though, and I think Jar Jar experienced that.
Yes. I've experienced that myself. So what is your favorite book then of all time?
The Little Engine That Could was, I mean, that one, I love those pictures. I like the moral, just believe in yourself. I think I can. I think I can. So, and that goes back to my first memory of a reading with my grandparents. They had that book, and I mean, that's an all-time classic for me. That's another reason why I haven't quite touched it yet on my podcast. I don't really know how I'd go about critiquing it, so it's kind of one that I'm a little hands off on right now. That might be something down the line where I go after, but right now that's kind of, it's up there. It's a magical one for me.
It is. And for people listening, he's already given away a spoiler for one of his own episodes as well, when he's already described what he thinks of was it Chicka Chicka Boom Boom?
Oh yeah, yep.
Yeah.
That's I gave that one away. Yeah. That's another one. That one was up there. I mean, it was just so fun for me. That's one of those ones where it kind of gets you into it as a child, where it's just fun to say chicka chicka boom boom.
It
So,
is. Even now, I like saying it. Chicka chicka boom boom.
yep.
So, do you actually have children yourself that you read to, or do you just read to your nephews and nieces?
Just nieces and nephews right now. Doesn't mean that down the line that's not in the cards, but right now it's just nieces and nephews. So,
Fingers crossed, I think there, because I think what would be better than you reading stories to kids? Really, perfect.
yep, yep.
So, what made you initially then decide to come up with the show itself? Then, because I mean, I love the show because it's bite sized as well, which fits in with the whole it being a review critique of children's books, because children's books are generally short stories, and so you've got the timing of the episode perfect. um and then what you do is you basically take a different children's book each episode. Occasionally it'll be one that's written by celebrity, and they're particular favorites of mine when you critique celebrities writings. And then you basically go through the idea of the story, what happens in the story, and then you every now and again you'll stop and you'll critique and you'll question the how realistic is this and things like this. How could that actually happen? And you go into the where's and whys logically of the ideas of the stories, and you talk about the illustrations and the way that they are written as well. So how did you come out with this idea, and when did it start?
Um, I think for a lot of people, a lot of things started kind of during the pandemic when you had a lot of time on your hands. I've done a lot of improv growing up around Chicago, and then moving to the city. I've been improvising for 5 or 6 years now. And then when the pandemic hit, everything kind of shut down. And so I was sitting there trying to find a new medium for myself. If you can't be on stage, then what do I do? And I didn't just want to go out there with any sort of no theme, no concentration on one thing, because of a funny story or a funny picture or can only get you so far. And one day, quite literally, I was staring at the wall during the pandemic, and my girlfriend's a teacher, and she teaches, um, she taught second grade at the time, and she was had to figure out things to get. It was right when the pandemic hit, and they shut down school, so she had to figure out ways to get in touch with her students and to keep them interested in learning. So she came up with the idea to read books to her students.
Yep.
And so I was staring at the wall and I saw she had a poster of, I forget what it was. It was a children's book. It was about an elephant. I want to say it was like Wally or Wally the Walleye or something like that. And I'm staring at it and I realized, it looked kind of like a movie poster or something. I was like, I'll do children's books reviews. And what better way to not only, I know I pick on a lot of the authors, but what better way than to pick on myself as well, which I'm a big fan of, as doing comedy. I like being able to, poke fun at people, but poke fun at myself. And always struggling with reading, I thought it was perfect to read and look into children's books. And then it kind of compounded when I was actually talking with my sister, and she was reading a book to her son.
Yep.
And the book was ended up, the moral was they threw a race for the main character. And her son looks at her and he goes, "Mommy, that's not right." And she's like, "Well, I mean, he didn't." And she was struggling to try to square that circle there. And she was like, "Well, he was handed a bad hand or this or that." And he's like, "Yeah, but they still shouldn't have thrown the race."
No.
and he's a 4-year-old looking up at her, like figuring this out. And she goes, "You know what? You're right." And it's funny because there's a lot of books out there that sometimes the morals just they don't add up. And so that really added to that and compounded. Well, wait a minute, like a lot of people think that a children's book's it's a couple of lines and that's it. And they think, oh, anybody can do it. And that's not necessarily the case. And then that's when you come up with books like that. And then you go from there. And I mean, the book, the show has always been constantly evolving, which is great. I'm always working on myself, but that's when I expanded into the celebrity children's books because they think they can write a children's book, or maybe their publicist writes it for them, and they think it's just a money grab. So it's fun, but that's not to knock all celebrities. Some of them are very good children's books writers, but some it's like, okay, was a one that they probably didn't even write themselves, and they threw out there, and they're getting a lot of publicity for it, and maybe I should take a look into it. So I don't know if that answers all the question there. I went off on a little tangent. I apologize. But
Well, I think you hit everything there.
yeah, so it's been an evolving experience for me. I've been learning, and you're right. To touch back on with the length of the show, I do know sometimes I can run a little long, so I apologize. I get up close to 10 minutes, but I also know since I'm not a celebrity myself, people are only going to want to hear so much of me. So I try to keep it as short and sweet as possible, so they can get a few jokes, get a few laughs, and see through my summaries if they actually want to get the book for their children, or if they're just reminiscing on an old book that they might have liked and want to see if it was really what they thought it was. Because that experience actually happened to me during one review with the rainbow fish, actually. Okay. I love that book for the pictures. The pictures are the best. They're sparkly, they capture the eye. It's fantastic. But then you go back and you read it and you read the moral and you're like, what the heck's going on here? This whole time I loved this as a child. And the moral is just, to some people, is a little off. And so it's interesting to go back and check that out. And so if you're a listener and you don't need children for this podcast, you can just kind of reminisce on old books or new books that are coming out. So,
well, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I approached you in a way, is because I mean, I was fascinated in reading it because we actually do have a few children's books. We've got a couple of like I said, Julia Donaldson books and all sorts here, and we haven't got any children, but they're great books.
Yep.
And so I thought, for the general person, it'd be interesting to listen to. It's interesting to listen to your show, but also for parents as well, who are after something for their children. It's an interesting show for them to listen to, where they can listen and think, oh, perhaps we'll get that one for our kid, our child, ourselves, for us. For or they might decide not to, because they might think there's something a bit dodgy about the moral of it. Because when you said about the moral of it, it reminded me of have you seen the film Elf?
I have, yeah.
With Will Ferrell, when they're in the and the character, the dad character, James Caan, towards the beginning or whatever, when he's having the meeting and they moan about it, or what's this at the back here, these blank pages, and he's saying, well, we couldn't afford that. What does it matter, because kids won't know anyway, they only look at the pictures. And that's almost a really good explanation of, in truth, there's a bit of truth to it, but there's also not as well, because some of these things that you pull up, like, that's a brilliant story about the 4-year-old that picked up on that, about that book. Because sometimes as kids, I mean, I've done it myself when I was a kid. I think I remember I read or I saw something and I'm like, hold on a moment, what's that all about? And it doesn't always make sense, or sometimes some of the stories, like you said, are morally questionable.
Yep. That's the issue with children's books is, I mean, there's so many there's a ridiculous amount out there, but And that's what goes back to what I was saying is some people so you might like them because the picture looks good and everything, but then when you actually go to read them yourself, you go, hold on a minute, there's not something right here. And that's part of the show is you can go in and check it out before, because online a lot of people will just throw a 4-star rating, 5-star rating on something, and you'll go, okay, everybody seems to love this one, so I'll pick it up. But a lot of times it's not the case. And sometimes you need to do your research, especially if you're reading it to a child. They're like sponges. But you can do some research for yourself too, like I was saying, and like you were saying, you have children's books for yourself, and a lot of them are great. They really are, and I mean, they even capture the imagination of myself. I luckily I thought I would get sick of reading so many children's books. No, I've only grown to love more and more of them, because they're just there's so many of them that are actually good out there, though, to contradict what I was saying, though, a little bit, is there's
Yeah.
so many good ones out there as well.
Yeah. When some authors catch what I call that magic, then they catch it really well, and it's there through the whole of a book if they get it right, and it is a
Mhm.
sort of magic as well.
Yep.
So, how do you record and then edit the show?
So I use this mic I've got right here, and because it's a week, a daily podcast. Sometimes I'm on the run, so I have to I'll bring this thing in a backpack or whatever, and sometimes I have to set up in not so great locations as far as recording. There'll be a little bit of an echo here or there, but that just means more editing for me on the back end. Um, but again, with it being a 5-minute episode and everything, that's what kind of makes it nice. I can just kind of set up where I need to be, and I can go about my daily business and then set it up in somebody's closet or wherever. So that's what I do. I just drag my recording equipment everywhere. Never thought I'd be doing that, but I am. So it's just about every day I'm dragging it somewhere. Um, and then as far as recording, I'm lucky enough to use the Adobe Audition,
Yeah.
and I have no editing background whatsoever. So if anybody catches something, feel free to let me know. But I'm all self-taught. I taught myself how to edit actually through the pandemic, when a buddy of mine and I decided to make a web series as well. So I taught myself off of that, and that's how I started to learn the Adobe. And then I uh, applied it to this, and I learned how to lower some of the reverb out of it, and chop up some of the bad areas if I'm stumbling all over the place or something. I want it to be clean for the reader. I want people to be able to get through it rather quickly, so I don't think they need to be waiting on me to catch a breath or something like that. So I might edit that out as well. So editing actually for me is on a 5 to 10 minute show is a little longer than you might expect. It can be up to 2 hours,
Yeah.
because I just want it to be perfect.
Okay. And then you've got, you've got a great package altogether. I mean, with how you record it, and then the editing that you do, and then the music as well, and that fantastic logo that's there on your baseball cap. I mean, it's a whole package. So I mean, how did the music come about, and the logo, was that something that you came up with straight away, or was it long and drawn out?
It's all been a process, quite really. So the music, again, I kind of I've known about some royalty free music that I used in my web series, and so I wanted this to be fairly NPR style. I want it to be comical, and so I feel like the music I found, it was a royalty free music, but it quite honestly, as soon as I found it, I felt like it fit perfectly for it. It really adds in that serious tone when it's really not a serious thing at all. And so I did a lot of searching with that. That was a relatively quick on the scale of things. That only took me a couple of days to kind of put that one together. But the logo itself, that was more than a that was uh, quite a while to figure out. I knew what I wanted, but I didn't know exactly how to get there. So I didn't know if it should be something real, whether it be a real picture of a pot on a stove with a cooked goose, or a real picture of a pot on a stove with a cartoon, or however you go about it. So I was taking pictures, doing things, playing around with it, trying to send it to people who are better than myself at editing, seeing if they could come up with something. And eventually, I told my girlfriend about it. I was like, I kind of want this cartoony goose. I showed her something on clip art that I was screwing around with, and she spent all day figuring out how to draw something and then upload it to Photoshop or whatever. I believe it was Photoshop, and she somehow came up with the after my direction. She came up with the whole entire drawing, and as soon as she showed me that, I was like, "This is perfect.
It is.
That's exactly what it is."
Yeah. Yeah. It was the title as well. This Goose is Cooked. Was that straightforward, or was that a long drawn out process as well?
That was more straightforward. That might have been the most straightforward out of everything.
Okay.
I like to think sometimes I can come up with one-liners and things like that. And as soon as I came up with the idea, I was like, "There's got to be a good name for this." Mother Goose. This goose is cooked and
Of course.
roasting people. So it all kind of came together, and you kind of take 15 minutes of brainstorming, throwing things out there, and you come up with it. And I thought that's what it's got to be.
Yeah. And the goose is perfect because all you need now is it's along similar lines to the classics like the Bugs Bunny. You'll expect him to come from behind, come around. It's that sort of cartoony humor behind the picture as well.
Yep. And that's exactly what I'm going for there. And I, after living with it for close to a year now, it gets better the more I look at it, because you're right, the cartooniness. I don't know why I was ever thinking of doing something real when that fits perfectly with the children's books and the illustrations.
Yeah, because it looks like a children's book illustration as well.
Hmm.
One of the better ones, should we say?
Yeah, yeah.
Spoiler warning: he does mention quite a few bad illustrations in some of the books.
That's some of the. It's just as good as, or it's just as important as the writing, so it needs to be mentioned.
It does. I mean, at a certain age, you're going in for it for both the story, but more for the story, but more for the pictures as well to tell the story to you. So you need those pictures to look like they're supposed to look. If you're talking about a horse, you want something that looks like a horse, not that looks like a giraffe.
Exactly, exactly.
So, what would you say then? I mean, you've already mentioned your favourite, but we'll you can do that one again if you want to. What would you say then are your five favourite children's books?
Okay, well, you would have to include that one, the little engine that could. But I'll throw in one that I didn't grow up on that I actually reviewed, and I thought it was just an instant classic. It's called "This Is Not My Hat," and the illustrations, everything about it, it's quite comical. It's about a fish who stole a hat from a bigger fish, and I mean, it takes you on one heck of a ride, and it's I mean, it had me laughing from start to finish as well. So that has to be an instant classic for me. If you haven't heard of that one, which I certainly didn't until I looked it up, it's called "This Is Not My Hat," and it's great. I highly recommend it. Um, there's so many different books out there that I would say I grew up on Goodnight Moon. That was a great one. That has to be up there. That author did The Runaway Bunny, which was also another classic. Um, Dr. Seuss, I mean, he's got some great ones. Green Eggs and Ham.
Yeah.
That's great. Touched on Richard Hargreaves. I think those books, the simple illustrations and the fact that he was able to do so many of those books, and every single one of them is really entertaining, is quite a talent. I'm trying to think. The Polar Express has, I mean, the pictures in that are great.
Yeah.
Not a big fan of the movie, but the
Yeah.
pictures in that one are fantastic. I feel like I'm missing a couple here. There was another train book that I loved. It was like The Runaway Train. It was about a train that left the tracks. That's another old book. Scuffy the Tugboat. I saw that one. That was a good one. I mean, the list goes on and on. Yet with Chicka Chicka Boom Boom, The Very Hungry Caterpillar.
Yeah.
Yeah, Eric Carle. That his illustrations are fantastic. I think that covers it. I don't know if I could put any in a top 5 order there for you. If you push me, I can try, but
Well, we already know what your number 1 is.
Yep.
Very useful engine. But that, I mean, The Very Hungry Caterpillar, I mean, that is a classic children's book. I mean, I remember that from back in the 70s when I was in school. So, you know, it's like I said, you know, it's one of these books where it's got that magic to it that is just so special. And if you hit it, then it's there for life. I think it's a book that anybody that's read it when they were a child, even into their adult years, it's a book that they'll remember fondly from back then.
Exactly. I mean, but not only with the writing, with his illustrations. I know he did it those are just, that's his style, and it's a great style. I mean, I don't know if anybody else could pull that off. It's got this like paper mache look, and when you do something that different and you're able to pull it off, it really makes the book quite special. And that's what I harp on as well. There's so many books that use just the computer animated drawings and expect you to go, okay, well the story's okay, so you should like it. But he's a real artist when he puts it all together like that. And I think I touched on Lois Alert too. She's another great artist when it comes to the drawings, Dr. Seuss. And when you can put all that together with a great storyline, it's perfect.
I mean, I have fond memories thinking back now to reading. I don't know if you know this book, Fungus the Bogeyman, which was by Raymond Briggs, and that's a really. He's the person who wrote The Snowman. Raymond Briggs. He wrote The Snowman.
Okay.
That's based on. But that's brilliant. Where there's just like these monsters that you know, because of course you know they're called bogeymen or boogeymen or whatever, and it's all about the life that you don't see. So he's a kid. He's a kid himself with his parents, and he's talking to, like, you know, human children or whatever, and being told off for it, and they go, no, you can't do that, and this sort of thing. And it's so much fun, and the pictures as well put the story across brilliantly. You know, you got they look exactly like you'd think bogeymen look, but more funny and humorous take on it instead. You know, instead of it being really scary, the sort of a funny version of that. So I remember that. What else was I remembering then? I don't know. I've remembered something else then as well. Oh yes, Roger Hargreaves as well. He's another one who, exactly like you were saying, with those Mr. Men books and the Little Miss books as well, he was also drawing his own. He was doing his own artwork as well, and it's that sort of. And I think Beatrix Potter, didn't she do something similar when she used to do her own drawings or something as well? And there's something interesting when all these people are full on and they've done it all themselves, because it adds to the magic of that book that they've got that sort of talent that can put these relatively simple-ish pictures in there, but it adds to the whole feel of the story.
That's very true. And going on with Roger Hargreaves, the fact that he's able to take such simplistic drawings but still make them so inviting to the eye, like that's a talent in and of itself too. It's some of these artists, I think, believe they have to reinvent the wheel or go to extreme detail or this or that. You don't necessarily have to do that. And he proves that point perfectly. They're just simple characters. They're basically a circle with some color.
Yep.
And it's perfect. It really is. And you get to see them interact with their world.
Mr. Tickle has incredibly long arms,
yeah,
so
and they're wrapping around doors.
Mr. Happy, he's yellow with a smile. Mr. Grumpy, he's got not a smile. Mr. Bump's got all these like bandages on him, and it tells everything. Mr. Daydream looks like a cloud that walks. There you go.
And that's all you need.
That's all you need. So what advice would you give to people if they wanted to start a podcast themselves?
Adapt, always learn. When you see other podcasters doing things, there's sometimes you say, oh, well, I don't want to do that, or I want to do it my own way. And sometimes the reason 99% of other podcasters are doing something, it's because that's how you're supposed to do it. And I've kind of quickly learned that. Especially for myself, I never really reached out to anybody about my podcast.
Yeah.
I asked for likes or ratings or this or that. And I'm quickly learning about a year in now. It's difficult. You've got to be a salesman for yourself, and you can't be afraid of what you're doing or afraid of other people. You have to go out there and sell yourself and sell your podcast. And was my mistake from the get-go, is I thought it would be just, oh, okay, you put it out there and it gradually explodes. And not to say that it hasn't taken off, which is, I mean, it's been a wonderful ride being able to see people from Germany and around the world listening in, which is fantastic to see. But it's just, you don't realize that a simple, okay, hey, if you could give me a rating, or if you could do this, or reaching out to people and talking about your podcast, that's how you get it out there. That's how you really sell it. And that's how you get more listeners. Because after a certain point, it's not, those listeners really aren't going to just keep showing up if you're not selling to them or showing them different products or different things that they can experience with your podcast, which is, I mean, another reason why my podcast, I've got so many different things on the back burner here, trying to really expand it and get it out to everybody so they can experience it.
I forgot to ask, actually, do you record your shows well in advance, or do you do it day by day?
I do it day by day, and that was another reason why I did it. I know I should have touched on that a little bit too, but going through Chicago and doing all the comedy schools and things there, they're always harping on you got to be writing comedy every day.
Yeah.
And so that was another big selling point to myself with this, is most people say, hey, I'm going to try to write comedy every day. Nobody ever gets around to doing it. So forcing myself with a podcast to actually sit down and write comedy every day, was the big reason to do this for myself, and I do. And now I sit down every day and I spend an hour, 2 hours writing. Some of it gets tossed out. Sometimes I have writer's block. But that's the big thing with the show is, I don't read a book and then spend a whole week on it. Yeah. And I think that's what needs to be understood, I guess, by everyone as well, is this is off the cuff writing that day, and it's out there. And I think that's what makes part of it a lot of fun too, is, okay, well, he read this book today and he's coming out with it, and this is what he thinks. He might be wrong, or he might regret what he put out. But that's what he thought of at that time. And so what I
That,
do is, yeah.
that's great, because then there's an immediacy to it, and it's there at that point, and you've got the. It's not like you've had time to work on what you're going to say. It is there at that point, and it is very much like, thinking about it, it's very much like improv, just going there and doing it on the spot.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a lot like improv, and it's a lot like stand up. It's my 5 minute open mic. I'm trying out jokes. Some of them are gonna really hit. Some might not. Some might not be for you. But uh, I'm out there, and it's I'm throwing them out there, and if I hope everybody really enjoys them, to be quite honest. So
Well, that's funny to know, because strange thing, because normally on in my listening, your show will be straight after I've listened to that day's, or one of the day's, Daily Dad Jokes podcast. I don't know if you know that one, and it's about 5 minutes of dad jokes.
oh, that's great. I've not heard of that one. That's that's a good one too. I'm gonna have to tune into that. That's a great idea.
It is 5 minutes of jokes, and it's an automated voice as well. It's a voice that's created by the person. He's a giving something away here, but he's a future guest in a few episodes time. But yeah, so he's created this, AI. So he uses the AI to tell the jokes technically, and his AI also does a daily quiz that's about 5 minutes as well.
That's great. That's a great idea. And see, there's another good example of, I mean, whether he thinks he's a comedian or not, that's a great way to test out jokes. And that's what I would recommend to a lot of comedians out there. I find, at least when I was around a lot of Chicago comedians, they didn't really put themselves out there. You'd be on stage for a night, and that would be about it. And the podcasting world really provides you a whole new medium where, you don't need to be, I mean, although it's a great thing, but if, you can't make the open mic at midnight on a Wednesday, it's great to get your jokes out there through a podcast. And they don't have to be an hour and a half long or what have you. It's just like that dad's jokes, about 5 minutes, and you're good.
That's great. So, what other podcasts do you actually listen to then?
Oh, that's a good good question. I'm a car guy, so
Yep.
TFL, I think it's called, yeah, TFL now. They have a podcast. That's a big one I listen to. And then a lot of the podcasts I'll listen to are just like reruns of radio shows, sports shows, and things like that. Um, yeah, I mean, there's so much out there, though. It's kind of hard to choose from sometimes.
Yeah.
Uh, but I'll tune into I'll tune into random shows here or there. I mean, my girlfriend even got me into the Bible in a year podcast. I fell off of that though. I feel bad. That's one that kind of makes you feel guilty. You listen to it for 20 days or whatever, and then you're like, oh, geez, just missed the last week.
Well,
But
eventually you get to some good bits.
yeah, oh yeah. Well, I mean, it is crazy. I didn't like the start is just all about, I mean, incest and all sorts of different things. So it's wild. You don't
There's
really realize that that's in the Bible.
some good pictures in some of the Bibles, though.
Oh yeah.
That's my first memory of Bible, actually, is the old children's Bibles that used to have with pictures in, and they used to write it in a way that was supposed to be for children. And even then, you'd be reading that, and as a young kid, and you'd be thinking, I have no idea what that word means.
Yep.
No.
That still comes to me half the time.
So, where can people find you and find the show and get hold of you?
Um, I would say Instagram. It's This Goose is Cooked. The spaces in between the writing. or in between each word. This goose is cooked. That's a great spot to find me. You can always direct message me or leave a comment somewhere. You can always find me on Apple Podcasts if you want to, if you have a book you want me to review. I'm more than happy to do that. Just drop it in either Instagram, Apple Podcast. Just learn that Spotify has ratings and reviews, and you can drop them there too as well. You can find me on Spotify. Um, I'm on just about every podcast platform there is. So I know a lot of my listeners like to listen in on Pandora as well. But you name it, Amazon Music, I'm there. So you can check me out there. Like I kind of referenced earlier, I'm going to start, hold on here in the next month or so, if we can get everything up and running. I'm going to start adding some videos and things. So I do have a YouTube channel. You can check me out there. Instagram, I'm going to try to shorten the video, or shorten the podcast to even shorter lengths, give you an even briefer review of maybe a quote in the review, and have it as a video on Instagram and YouTube. So that's the next goal, is to get that out there, provide the listeners more content.
Well, the Instagram thing and the video clips, you could just do what you'll be doing, what you do at the beginning now, which you started to do, which is like the little teaser that you have at the beginning of your show now. You could just have like a teaser of what to expect from the episode each day, and then each day that you put an episode out, just put that out as a teaser for people, so that they have an idea of what your show is about that day.
Yep, I'm playing around with a lot of different things. You figure out a lot of people, they want shorter and shorter and shorter. So, I mean, if you can get it down to 15 seconds and have it be funny, that's the goal almost. So I'm playing around. You're right. Teaser would be one. Maybe just a quote, maybe a quick review.
Yep.
But I'm gonna try to get some shorter content out there, and hopefully it'll be up and running here in the next month or so. But yeah, I've been playing around, experimenting with that, just to provide a more visual, so people can see me as well too. I think that's always great when people can kind of connect with the host.
Absolutely. Anyway, you can find me on any streaming network. Just like David just said, Spotify, in Apple Music, it's called now, Deezer, Pandora, iHeartRadio. You can also find me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, just by looking up Pods Like Us. And you can contact me through podslikeus@gmail.com. Anyway, thank you very much for speaking with me today, David.
Thank you, Marv. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been fun. Great.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Look forward to this. And thank you everyone for listening, and I hope you listen again to another episode of Pods Like Us. Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv, and this time I am joined by the filmmaker Matthew Zaytoun. Hello, Matthew. How are you?
What's going on, world? How you doing, England?
You know that's going to have to be the introduction to your podcast now.
That's gonna be my ad lib.
Yeah, Zaytoun in the afternoon.
Forever. I actually have a trademark already. My lawyers are on it. Yeah.
But it's always the afternoon somewhere.
It's always the afternoon somewhere, as you can see. This podcast is brought to you by Modelo. Buy shit.
If only it was brought to you by that, I wouldn't be living where I do.
Oh yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. You got to get like you got to do like the 50 Cent thing and just hashtag effing vodka on like every single thing you do, and then eventually, actually, my one buddy Squirrel, who he has a podcast as well.
Yep.
He just has Heineken all over the background, like just like there's just fucking like sponsors the show. I think he just loves Heineken, and I guess he's shooting for it. But guy still loves Heineken, you know what I mean? But you know, you gotta wear the brands you love. Shout out to Patagonia.
Yep.
I actually really like Yvonne Schoenhardt. He's a good CEO, good guy. But yeah, man, I don't know.
So, what's your first memory of watching a film?
My first memory of watching a film were the VHSs, man.
Yeah.
The VHSs in the 90s were nuts. But I remember being like a little kid, and you would get like a VHS sometimes off of like either like Happy Meals or something, and you get those orange cassette tapes like back in the day. And I remember hanging out with like my older and like little cousins, and we would just watch cartoons over and over and over. And then I would hang out by their house, and they had just had like a bunch of VHSs, and we would just they didn't have cable television, so we would just keep watching movies over and over. And it was one film that I still watch to this day a lot. My family's Lebanese, so there's one film called West Beirut by. I learned later in life it was Quentin Tarantino's first AC made the film. He's like the pride of Lebanon. Ziad Doueri. Yeah, he the focus puller for fucking like Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, and like Jackie Brown. He made his own film called West Beirut, and it was about basically like how things in Lebanon changed, like when the civil war like broke out over there. So it was just very and it was a foreign language film, so you would have to like read the subtitles and like but it was like it was very powerful imagery. Well, actually, it wasn't even very powerful imagery. It was actually, now I understand the imagery, but like back then it was just like we would watch it over and over and over again, because I think my dad just like just didn't fucking return the VHS to fucking Blockbuster. I think he just like stole the fucking VHS. And we would watch it over and over again, and that's like my initial spark into it, but it didn't really make me a filmmaker. I actually didn't even realize that films were subject to photography until like very later in my life. Photography actually was my first like foray into it. Yeah. So yeah, it was crazy.
So what led you? I mean, first of all, just as a tangent, I used to think those video cassettes were so cool. You know, that were differently coloured, like you said. You know, the orange or the yellow and the bright blue tape cassettes, and you just think, oh, that's so cool. Whereas you look back on it now and you think, well, of course, it'd be easy for them to do. They just change the colour of the plastic. But back then, when we were younger, we used to think that was awesome.
We lost the packaging with all this digital shit now. Like there's no it's just like it's just like literally like avatars now. Everybody just has a bunch of avatars. That's the extent of the packaging for everything. It's kind of why I like the Midnight Miracle, because the guy Dave Chappelle's trying to release vinyls of the what's it called? Hold on, let me see if I should move. If they're getting too loud. Hold on. Woo.
The people listening is walking around. He's got a really cool studio.
Oh yeah. As you can, sorry about that, guys. It's a little ridiculous. Just I have a lot of people that live over here, so it's a little bit darker right now. But this is my room. It's kind of a mess right now, so I can't